Hey everybody, and welcome back again for your next writing lesson. Last couple of days, we spent some time organizing and planning out how we kind of wanted our stories to go over time. And today we're going to look at showing versus telling and the great ways to start our story that's going to get our reader involved and wanting to read our story right away. So what do we mean when we talk about showing versus telling, right? So to show something is when you describe things in a way in your story that you make the reader feel like they're in the story, they're a part of the story. They could, remember in reading, we talked about being able to play a movie in your head and visualize and envision something. You help someone do that. You help your reader do that when you show instead of telling. So for example, an example of saying something that's showing, it would be Brian pursed his lips and clenched his fists into tight balls. Try as he might, he could not contain himself. Within seconds, he erupted like a volcano. So when we read that, we can picture him getting mad, right? He's clenching his fist, his purses his lips like this, and he's trying really hard, but he can't get mad. And then he just erupts like a volcano. We can picture what that looks like in our head and how someone would be feeling in that scenario, right? Instead of just putting something like that in our story that says Brian was angry, he started to yell. We could say that in a story and our reader's going to know what that means. But if we describe it in a way like this, it makes it more interesting to read, and it makes our story something that's going to draw the reader in, and they're going to want to be there and picture like they're there with Brian when he's doing that. Here's another example. It says, a gigantic grin spread across Bailey's face, and her eyes lit up like the sky on the 4th of July. We're being able to picture what Bailey's doing on her face and what she's feeling like based on that description, right? Instead of just saying something like Bailey was happy, right? We want to really be able to show what's going on and make it so the reader can picture it and envision it and pretend like they're there ready to be a part of the story, as opposed to just telling them what they're supposed to realize or what they're supposed to think. Readers don't want to be bored. This is boring, right? This is just telling them exactly what happens in order with no emotion and no description. We want to show, not tell. So something that I always think is super fascinating is it's important to show what's happening in the very beginning of the story, because we want to get the readers interested right away, right? A lot of times, think about when you pick up a book and you're trying to decide what to read. If the first page or the first chapter is boring, a lot of the times you stop and you don't want to keep continuing to read it, right? You get bored with it and you're like, okay, this is not something I'm interested in reading. So the first page or chapter of a book sometimes is what keeps the reader interested in the story. So you want to start off right away by showing and not telling. You want to start immediately at the very beginning of the story with being able to keep your reader engaged and keep your reader interested in your story. If you think about it, we've been doing that with The Tiger Rising, right? In the very first page, it starts right up. It doesn't introduce us to the character and say, Rob was a 6th grade student at small town in Florida, and just tell us about Rob, right? It's from the beginning. I'm going to read you the first section. It says, that morning after he discovered the tiger, Rob went and stood under the Kentucky Star Motel sign and waited for the school bus just like it was any other day. The Kentucky Star sign was composed of a yellow neon star that rose and fell over a piece of blue neon in the shape of the state of Kentucky. Rob liked the sign. He harbored a dim but abiding notion that it would bring him good luck. Finding the tiger had been luck. He knew that. He had been out in the woods behind the Kentucky Star Motel, way out in the woods, not really looking for anything, just wandering and hoping that maybe he would get lost or get eaten by a bear and not have to go to school ever again. So the author right away is putting us in a scene, right? Kate DiCamillo is putting us in that scene, helping us picture what Rob's thinking and how he's acting. She's describing what things look like around him with the Kentucky Star sign and how it's dim and neon that like falls up and down in the shape of the state of Kentucky. She's describing and she's showing us the scenario and the scene that Rob is a part of right at the very beginning. We want to be able to do that with our own stories. So what does that look like in a story where it's not a professional author and it's someone like me or you? So I wrote 2 examples of the first scene in my story, one that shows and one that tells. And we're going to take a minute and see which one you think sounds better and more engaging to the reader, right? Which one engages the reader more? So the first one is a sample that simply tells what's happening, right? And I'm going way back to that first scene in my story mountain where I'm picturing Will, my main character, dropping his lunch tray in the cafeteria, right? And so here's just telling. Will walked through the cafeteria on the way to his table. Suddenly, he dropped the tray out of his hand. He could see the food laying all over the floor. He looked around at all the students laughing around him. He felt so embarrassed. So that's just telling what's happening. I'm not really giving a description of the scene. I'm not making you be able to picture what's going on in the cafeteria and put yourself in the shoes of Will, the main character. Here's one where I'm showing what's going on in the scene, right? I said, Will shuffled his feet across the shiny cafeteria floor. He had just spotted the table with an open seat next to Travis. Will went to hurry to the seat, and he could feel the weight of the lunch tray start shifting from one hand to the other. All of a sudden, there was a loud bang. Will looked down at his shoes that were covered with ketchup and applesauce. The empty lunch tray lay on the floor next to his feet. He could hear a roar of laughter break out all over the cafeteria. Will could feel his cheeks as if they were on fire. His palms started to sweat, and he could feel his heart beating faster and faster. He quickly pulled up his hood and sprinted out of the cafeteria. Now, as an extra part of your assignment, I want to see who all paid attention. I, on purpose, spelled one word in this paragraph incorrectly. All right, and I'm telling you right now, you get a bonus point if when you submit your assignment, you can tell which word, I'm kind of hovering over it right now, which word it is that has a spelling error. Okay, so see if you can catch that. That's part of your assignment to add in, see who all watched through all the way through the whole middle of it. Okay, back to the lesson. So the bottom sample is, notice how much more I'm showing what's going on than in the first one. At the very first one, I feel finished with, he felt so embarrassed, right? So think about, how did I show in the bottom paragraph that Will felt embarrassed? I'm going to highlight this section down at the bottom here, where it says, Will could feel his cheeks as if they were on fire. His palms started to sweat, and he could feel his heart beating faster and faster. He quickly pulled up his hood and sprinted out of the cafeteria. So in that section, I'm showing that Will's embarrassed, but I'm not just saying he felt embarrassed. But I'm engaging the reader more. I'm making them picture the scene and feel what Will's feeling more than if I simply tell them what's happened. Same thing with up here. I say, suddenly he dropped the tray out of his hand and he could see the food laying all over the floor. Well, in mine, I described that as, all of a sudden there was a loud bang. Will looked down at his shoes that were covered with ketchup and applesauce. The empty lunch tray lay on the floor next to his feet. So instead of just saying he dropped the lunch tray, I'm give the sound effect of a loud bang, and then I say that Will looks down at his shoes that are covered with ketchup and applesauce. So I'm helping that reader picture it. I don't know about you guys, but I would be way more interested in reading a story that starts the way my second paragraph does than my first one does, right? So try to pay close attention to simple things like that, okay? Simple things like, don't just tell what happenings, play out the scene, make it be like, I could picture being there, I'm involved, I'm part of this story now, and because the author is doing such a good job of showing me what's going on. So which version of the scene did you like more and did you think was more engaging? Always think about that, all right? And think about how did that second version, or how do authors in general help you picture it? What kind of words were used that could help you picture it? All right, when you're going to write your own first scene that's showing and not telling, it might be a good idea to go back and rewatch and look at some of the words and descriptions that were in my example, or listen to what I read in the Tiger Rising earlier in this lesson to kind of help you shape the way you want the beginning of your story to look like. And always, always remember that your readers are looking for a way to be a part of the story. When we pick up a book to read, we want to be a part of that story. It's your job, or it's my job, or whoever the writer is. It's their job to create the version of the story that makes readers feel that way, right? It's not the reader's job to become part of the story. It's our job as writers to make them feel that way. And showing them instead of telling them is always a better way to get them involved and make them feel like they're a part of the story. Lastly, this is your job. It's not due today. It's due on Friday. So there is no assignment you're going to submit today. All right, you're submitting everything on Friday. So you're going to use today and tomorrow to work on the opening scene of your story. All you're doing is the opening scene, the first scene where we meet your character, or we kind of get the setting. And you're going to notice that in my scene, I didn't just list things about the character, but I helped you guys get to know by something that happens to the character. All right, so by Friday, you're going to turn to that first scene. Do not just describe your character. Work in a scene. Tell us something that happens with your character by showing us instead of telling us. Don't forget, if you watch the whole lesson, you should be able to pick up a bonus point by that little thing I gave you in the middle. All right. So when you submit your story, at the bottom or at the end, say, oh, and for my bonus point, this is the word I noticed that is misspelled. So go back and watch. If you didn't miss it, if you missed it in the middle, you can always go back and watch it again. All right. This is due Friday. Good luck writing. We're super excited to get to this beginning point and meet your characters in the context of your story.